You know how I say it's not wet filament? Well, sometimes it actually is. A good friend from Makerdeck is having some shifty issues, more resin failures than you could shake a stick at, and a clogged nozzle or two. All this and more PrintFixFriday, episode 47. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and YouTube's longest weekly Print Fail Fix series. We are almost at 1 year, and I'm curious as to what you all want us to do for that 1 year. But we do need your help. It is getting incredibly tough to find the fails, so make sure when you do have a print fail that you tag us on all the social medias and use the hashtag PrintFix so we can easily find them. We could really use your help, and then hey, you get a little shout out on a YouTube channel. It's always fun to do that, right? We have a good lineup of fails. First, we're gonna start with actual wet filament. And no, it's not my issue with wet filament, it's somebody else's. Then we move on to a clogged nozzle, probably. After that, we move on to a Makerdeck team failure. Makerdeck is awesome, and you should hear all about Makerdeck in just a little bit. And then a resin failure where it picks up the entire vat. Oh, that one is scary. From there, we move into a resin print that probably should never be printed. It's something that would be an absolute monumental nightmare. And hey, if you think you're up for the task, you can go find the file on Facebook. After that, we have another resin failure, but we're dealing this time with suction forces. The parts have just flat out shifted, and that one's looking a little crazy. And then finally, we deal with another suction cup on a resin failure, but this time with looking like a bit like it belongs at an Outback Steakhouse. But you know what doesn't belong in an Outback Steakhouse? Our sponsor, 3D Musketeers. It's because we're a small business and affording meals out can sometimes be difficult. Anyways, if you are looking to get professional 3D printing, 3D scanning, or even CAD design work, you can reach out to the experts over at 3D Musketeers. With now over 40 printers and over 40 years of combined experience, the experts here at 3D Musketeers can help you get your ideas out of your head and into your hands as quickly and efficiently as possible. And we are doing so much to make that easier. We're going to be launching the Making Awesome Academy here, hopefully in the next 6 months. I am going into filming very soon. In fact, I've bought a green screen and so many other things to make that entire class structure something that is a little bit elevated for the production quality that we do here on YouTube. And that will be available to anyone that is looking to make something, make an invention, go to market, sell or license, because that's what it's designed for. Will of course have a cost to it, but the idea is that it helps you wade through the valley of shadow and death that is the chasm of product development and get to making your product as quickly as possible. Of course, we're also working on the Politician, which is going to help you keep your enclosures both heated and mildly filtered. It works okay from my experiences with it. But we do recognize that not everyone needs our services right now, but you might want to support the channel and what we do. And for that, we have a Patreon with tiers starting as low as $1 every single month that helps the channel grow. That money goes directly into helping us pay for editors, lights, cameras, and action, making certain that we can have as high quality content as possible when I hopefully get the time to do it. But we also know that sometimes finances can be a little bit tough, so a like, share, and subscribe goes a long way to helping this channel grow as well. But enough of the call to actions, and I know you guys don't like them, so thank you for sticking through it if you did. But let's get into those fails and fixing them. 3 brands, 2 PLA plus brands, and PETG, no amount of dehydrating works. Now you might be thinking he's gonna say it's not wet filament, but let's watch the video. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that is wet filament. 99 times out of 100 it isn't. But there's the one time where it is. And this is one of them. This is actually wet filament. And if you're dealing with 3 brands, 2 of them PLA plus and 1 PETG, and they're having this problem across all of their brands, I have a bit of advice, and it is stop printing underwater. I live in Florida. It's effectively a swamp here. The fact that I'm not sweating constantly is because my power bill is insane. And for those that don't believe me, there you go. It is 81.5 degrees and 45% ambient humidity at 8:23 p.m. at night. It's hot. And it's a little bit moist. And that means that, yeah, we actually every now and then have issues with filament uptaking water. But it takes a long time for most filament to uptake water. And so what do you do when you get wet filament? Well, you dry the hell out of it. And they're saying they're using a food dehydrator and the Instant Pot attachment. And something tells me that might not be working. The big thing about a food dehydrator or anything that you're using to dry is that you want air to be circulating in and out. If you've ever made beef jerky, which I definitely didn't buy a food dehydrator to dry filament, and then it got used for beef jerky, and so I started buying different things. But you'll know that they suck in air from the bottom and they push it out the top, because you don't want to keep that air in there, because as you're pulling away the moisture, you got to get rid of that moisture or you're going to have a bad time. I wonder if he's using the air fryer attachment. In air fryers, it's just a very, very, very tiny convection oven with a more powerful fan. You've been played. I'm sorry, but they do work pretty well. My guess here is that their food dehydrator attachment is not doing a good job of releasing that trapped moisture. It's actually one of the biggest gripes with some of the cheaper dehydrators out there for filament. I would also agree with this individual here that sometimes the temperature probes for food dehydrators are not all that accurate. And a K-type thermocouple is actually pretty affordable. We'll link to some down in the description. And they just allow you to put temperature measurements wherever you want. It's actually kind of great if you are working on a heated chamber, maybe with something like a politician. We are also seeing unprecedented heat waves across the world. It's like climate change is actually a thing. Go figure. Who knew the scientists would be right this entire time? In a case like this, dehydrate the hell out of it. I would go get a purpose-built food dehydrator. I'll link to a few in the description so you can take a look at some of the ones that we recommend. Ultimately, it's going to come down to making sure it's done right. If it is, you'll have no problems. Let's move on. I have no idea what happened. Well, that's good, because I do. You have a either clogged nozzle or some sort of partial clog or extra friction inside of your filament path. Let's see what we're looking at here. It is a Creality Ender 3, so it is Bowden, and we are looking at a filament that really does appear to be a little bit too cold. It's a little matte for me, but let's see if they tell us what we're looking at. So it is Cura 4.13. I would like to see more people switching over to Cura 5.0 and now 5.1. We made a video covering Cura 5. We'll card to it so you guys can take a look with the new Arachne engine, which is honestly pretty darn cool. I agree. It is partially clogged. Cold pulls are always a great way to do it, but if maybe you have some excess friction in your Bowden tube, instead of the nozzle being clogged, let's think that maybe there could be some shmoo or something inside the Bowden tube creating friction. It would look like a clog. It would not smell like clog because that wouldn't have a smell to it, but it would immediately act like one. So the clog is probably most likely, but if you do some cold pulls and you're getting real clean cold pulls and nothing's happening, then it's time to look at your filament path itself. Cold pulls, and as much as I hate white filament, it is honestly the best for doing cold pulls because you can see as soon as your filament path and the nozzle and everything in there are clean because the white filament will come out white. Speaking of nozzles, I got a nice little package here from my friends over at E3D. It is exactly what you might think it is. They're dark. They're rainbow, and I'm really excited to try them out. So get subscribed if you want to see my take on some very, very hard nozzles. But anyways, do some cold pulls, take a look, see if it's coming out clean. If it's coming out clean, go ahead and try this print one more time, but also be careful of something like this. This is a temp tower. Very, very typical when you're looking at tuning in filament, and you really do want to be certain that you're starting at a low temperature that makes sense for your filament. Let's say you're trying to print nylon. Don't try to extrude nylon at 215 degrees centigrade because it's, generally speaking, not going to work, and you will likely clog your hot end and cause problems. And as the temperature goes up, maybe it does start to slowly extrude, but you've also now ground into your filament. So there are some things to take a look at. Again, let's review. Probably a partial clog. Go ahead and do some cold pulls. If that doesn't work, pull out the Bowden tube, take a look at it, and see if it's messy at all. If it is, replace with Capricorn tubing. And if both of those things are not the issue, let's take a look at your extruder drive gear and make sure it is not full of crap. And if all of those things are fine and you are still having those problems, well, we'll have to touch base because I'm fairly certain at least one of those gonna solve that problem. We got a fail from a good friend of the channel, Liz B, otherwise known as Pez Liz from the Makerdeck crew. And if you don't know Makerdeck, we actually recently interviewed Chris Barillo, and then Prusa interviewed him a week or so later, watching you guys. We'll card to that video so you guys can take a look, talking all about Makerdeck, a place where people can go and hang out, stream your prints, and it's actually like a crowdsourced spaghetti detective, which is honestly pretty friggin' cool if you ask me. We are looking at getting a setup. Stay tuned, because we are actually going to start streaming to Makerdeck. And yes, that actually includes when we make videos, because I did get approval that we could do that if we wanted to do such a thing. So maybe that'll be a thing, but we're going to definitely start to stream prints, especially ones on the time-lapse printer. And yeah, that's the piece for the East Coast Rep Festival for the We the Builders program. We got a piece of Sanjay's hair, which is awesome. But Liz has layer shift, and she knows it. We are looking at what I think is her Fucus, or Fucus, I don't know. It's one of the two. It's the first one, but I like saying the second one. Basically, they're Ender 3 clones that have the fancy I can fold. They don't fold great. Like Joel showed on a video where he talked all about it. We'll card to it so you guys can take a look. It's not really useful. All printers will fold if you try hard enough. That's how I look at it. But this got a bit of a layer shift, so let's take a look at the layer shift. And oh no is absolutely the right answer. I think it's kind of obvious what we got going on here. We've got some buildup. We can see some areas where it doesn't really appear the parts are properly supported. It looks like we might have had some buildup. Printer ran into it and the motor decided no. And because most printers don't know when they've skipped steps, because a lot of stepper motors don't have rotary encoders or some way to tell position, because if they did, you would normally call them servo motors and they would cost considerably more money. Some printers like the Prusas can detect when they skip steps and they can rehome themselves. However, sometimes that recovery is still not perfect, so it's still a system people are working on. But hey, it's better than coming back to this. Thankfully, Liz saw this pretty quickly, or maybe the Makerdeck crew saw it and warned her of it, and there really is no easy fix for this. When you're dealing with prints like this, and by the way, that's a ton of infill. If you're not doing like a very functional print, you can cut it down to like 10%, especially with gyroid, and you'll be just fine. But you do want to make sure that, especially small parts, we're looking at some pin systems here, that those are well supported to the base of your printer. If they don't have a lot of contact patch, if you like it, then you should put a brim on it, or you can also utilize slicers like Prusa Slicer or Cura to add ears to those areas. And ears would just be little single layer thick cylinders that are easy enough for you to either peel off or cut off with an X-Acto knife in post. Those ensure, however, that you get good adhesion on your first layer and that the rest of the part doesn't end up having a problem. Now, her parts did not come off the bed, but chances are maybe it did peel up a little bit, and that's what the printer ran into. So if you like it, then you should put a brim on it. I swear some of the shit I do just for the videos, because I don't know if I would do that normally, but sometimes I would. It just depends on the mood that I'm in. Anyways, this one is always fun. How many of you have done this? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you don't know what's going on, you're gonna find out. Stay tuned. But this was submitted by one of our patrons in our Discord, Aaron. Remember, if you want to come hang out with us on Discord, you can join our Patreon at the $10 tier or higher. It said, first failure I've had in a while. Always double that your VAT is secured. Just glad the plate didn't release from the vat and cause a huge mess. Yeah, gosh darn right. You got lucky. So what happened? The Saturn is missing the screws on the side that hold the vat down to the screen. So I'm fairly certain, like, that first layer, it stuck to the FEP and pulled it away. And they are absolutely incredibly lucky that this did not cause any issues for them, because yeah, that could have slowly peeled off and just dumped resin all over the floor. And as we know, ladies and gentlemen, resin is toxic, and we want to be sure we're being safe about it as well. Remember, safety first. Safety squids. So how do you solve this? They say it right in the post. Double check that the vat is secured. make sure those screws are nice and tight. Next up, another post from Facebook. Thankfully, I don't find these, so thank you to all of our Patreon members and fans that submit using the hashtags PrintFix, tagging us on all the social medias, because that means I don't have to go to the cesspool that is the Facebook 3D printing community. This is a resin print that somebody wanted to print and support. And if you're sitting there saying, why? Well, I would agree with you, because oh my gosh, no. It says, word up to all. I want to print the below STL, which was not designed for 3D printing. Any recommendations on the angle and support types, please? Really like it as a model and hoping I can print it. The answer is no, you cannot. Stop it. Not on a consumer grade resin printer. Now, I know some of you might be out there saying, well, Grant, I can do it. Well, then go do it. Honestly, it ain't worth my time. It ain't worth your time. And you would just do it to chase the win. So you know what? F it. Go ahead, find the file, prove it to me by printing it, and I will show it in the next PrintFix Friday video and say that you are right. I don't know if that has value to anybody, but kind of some. This print is atrocious. Do not print this under any circumstances. Please, dear God, no. A good way to handle this would be to print the tree trunk and all of the branches as a print, and then do everything else with things like yarn or floral foam or some sort of non-3D printed media. Yes, you could go out, use a Mimaki printer or a full color polyjet printer, something that prints with solid support material that is washed away, so it's soluble. And that might work, but I would still guess this thing would be incredibly fragile. So the answer is no, you can't print it. And please don't try. You're going to hurt your printer, and most importantly, you're going to hurt me. We don't want to hurt me. This is getting ridiculous. Thanks to Chris Catlett for sending this one over, and the fail was immediately obvious to me. They have way too much surface area. The magnetic plate has shifted from the magnetic base, and that is common when you have way too much cross-sectional area. The best thing to do here would look at reorienting the parts, or more importantly, potentially printing less of them so that you don't have so much suction force. When the printer is trying to release, what's occurring here is that it's not. And where it is trying to, it's sliding a little bit on the FEP sheet. There's a ton of suction force when you're trying to remove from your FEP plate. That's why printers like the Formlabs Form 3, as well as the Prusa SL1S, both have their own methods rather than just ripping it off the FEP. Specifically, the SL1S uses a method that tilts the vat down a little bit to help peel that layer slowly rather than forcibly ripping it apart, which is how most of consumer grade resin 3D printing works. The other thing I want to point out here is you're not wearing gloves. Please wear gloves, because remember, resin is toxic. And while you might say, Grant, I cleaned it, I'm going to say you probably didn't clean it enough. Put on gloves. It's cheap insurance. You should do it, and you know better than that. So how do we solve this problem? Well, we look at reorienting the parts. We look at potentially hollowing them out, or unfortunately, look at printing less of them. That is one of the downsides to flex plates. While they do make it incredibly easy to pull your parts off of your build plate, they also have a weakness: their magnetism. And at some point, suction force will overcome the magnetism, which will result in this problem. Now, I've had issues like this before where I've actually overcome the bolt holding on the build plate itself, and the build plate started to rotate from all of the suction force. That was also before I really learned a lot about resin 3D printing. So if you guys do want us to talk more about resin 3D printing, let me know down in those comments below. Maybe we can do some more videos specifically on the topic of cross-sectional area and how it affects resin 3D printing. I'd like to really dive deep into it, but we are so busy these days. Some for the right reasons, some for not, but we're so busy, and I'm even having time getting all these videos put out there. So I appreciate you guys sticking with us through all of it. Layer separating. How do I prevent this? This is a massive suction cup. Now, I can see a little bit of air down there, but I'm guessing we don't have anywhere near enough, and that might even be caused by a cavitation point. There is nowhere near enough holes in this to let air and resin back into the part. We can actually see some damage here, and maybe even potentially some damage elsewhere. They do have one hole here, but I don't know if it's enough. I mean, clearly it's not, because we still have some pretty serious issues with suction forces. This part would be much better if they tilted it a little bit and raised it on some supports. I recognize that that means your bottom surface may not be perfect. If you do support correctly, you should be okay. And remember, more supports, better than not enough in my book. But this is absolutely from too much suction force. Now again, this could also be from slightly too low cure times. So I would recommend running the cones calibration, making sure that your resin is well calibrated. But of course, always run your prints through UV tools. Seriously, people, it is cheap insurance for resin 3D printing. In fact, it's so cheap, it's free. We even did a video covering it. We are going to do one diving deeper into it, so make sure you get subscribed for that. But they are definitely pulling a vacuum. And my guess here is that this is at what would be the bottom of the model, not what's touching the build plate, because of course the model's print upside down, but what is touching the resin vat. And everything up until that point, because I don't see any of that peeling, was in fact under heavy vacuum force. We do see some bending here, and that's because you're not properly supporting all of your edges. I think it's time to go and learn a little bit about supporting properly, so that you don't have a lot of problems. And look at that, I was right. The holes are up here rather than down here, which is where you actually need them. Because remember, resin printers print upside down. I agree with this user that this is basically a no-win situation. They actually have some great advice, and of course, we will link to this and all the other fails down in that description down below. But let me know what you guys thought of this PrintFix Friday, episode 47. But that's all I got for you all today. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one. If you want to see my take on some very, very hard nozzles. Do we leave the wink? We gotta leave the wink, right? We just gotta leave the wink. It's for the ladies. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video, and a massive thank you goes out to all of our Patreon and YouTube channel member supporters. Remember, if you want to kick a couple of bucks into that creator fund, it is the best time of the month. Do it the first week or two, where your dollars get stretched the furthest, especially on platforms like Patreon. We have tiers starting as low as $1 to help make videos like this possible multiple times per week. And at the $5 tier and higher, you get your name listed right next to me, like the awesome Musketeers over there. Right below me will be the entire PrintFix Friday series, where we talk about print fails and how to fix them. And right next to that will be my video on 3D scanning a tough part. I did have some failures in it, but we're gonna do better next time, I promise. I'll see you guys down in those comments and in the next one. Take care.